about the timeline of Reconstruction. And as you are watching this and listening and probably taking some other notes, you should remember that if you need more clarification, to ask those questions in class, write down your questions, you can talk about them, and also feel free to use the textbook, pages 500 to 531. Will be very helpful. So this is just a quick review, again, of 1865 to 1877. We have talked a lot about Lincoln's and Johnson's plan. Lincoln assassinated, cannot carry out his plan, so Andrew Johnson is responsible for trying to carry out presidential Reconstruction, and the common denominator there is the 13th Amendment, freedom for slaves. In 1866, again, the beginning of presidential Reconstruction, Andrew Johnson, not as favorable on the Freedmen's Bureau, and despite the fact that he has vetoed the Freedmen's Bureau and the Civil Rights Act, Congress overrides his veto and continues to push him about the protection of African Americans in their rights. And this is a struggle again between the legislative branch and the executive branch. Southern states are going to continue to try to pass black codes to keep slaves, former slaves, in as low a position socially, politically, and economically as they can. And we'll learn more about those black codes in class. In 1867, Johnson, still fighting for any kind of control over Reconstruction that he can get, once again is kind of bullied into the passage of Congressional Reconstruction or military Reconstruction. And even though he vetoes the act, Congress overrides it. They look for some charges with which to impeach him, and they do. And even though they find him not guilty, he is severely weakened in his capacity as president. Not to worry though, 1868, a new election. Ulysses S. Grant is elected president. The 14th Amendment is passed, which allows for the citizenship of African Americans, and all appears to be well in Reconstruction as well as Northern politics. Last but not least, in 1870, the 15th Amendment is passed, which allows all black males to vote. Now, if we continue with Reconstruction, you can see that we're going to skip about 6 years here, from 1802 1876, 1877. And you're going to say, well, what happened in all those years? Well, that's the story of the myth and reality of black rights for their life is going to be a struggle between what rights they really have on paper versus what rights they can actually use in real life. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well as in class. So to jump ahead, in 1876, most of the southern states had regained their status, full states within the Union, and they feel as though they have paid the price. And this next election in 1876 is going to be one that is not just an election, but something known as the Compromise of 1877, because it is going to involve the election of one Rutherford B. Hayes. No relation. He's an English Hayes, we are Irish Hayeses. And it's a compromise because President Hayes, or Rutherford B. Hayes, prior to becoming president, is a Republican, which is fine. And the Democratic candidate is named Samuel Tilden. Of course, the Southerners would love Samuel Tilden to be the president. He's a Democrat. He would probably go back to allowing things the way they were before the Civil War. But the Congressional Republicans are not going to allow that to happen. And when the popular vote is taken, it is not clear that there is a majority in the electoral vote. So you know what happens. The electoral votes, if there is no majority, has to go to the House of Representatives. And so the House, among themselves, talk between the northern and the southern representatives and say to the South, if you let Mr. Hayes become the president, he, as a Republican, will do a couple of things for you that we think will make you very happy. The Southerners said, what? Well, how about if we withdraw the federal troops from the South, effectively ending that military reconstruction? Sounds good. How about if we have a Southerner become a part of Hayes's cabinet? Now that sounds even better. You're really sweetening the deal. One more thing. How about if we continue to have the money for all these new internal improvements continue to flow your way, especially for roads, canals, railroads, fixing up the ports, building industries, repairing your land. In short, kind of putting you back together as you were prior to the Civil War, only better, more modern. They agree, and Rutherford B. Hayes becomes the president in 1877. So that ends Reconstruction the way we know it. But what happens with African Americans is the real story of Reconstruction. And so, in the late 1800s, what we're going to be seeing is several ways of restricting African American rights in reality. But what it says on paper is that you are free, you are citizens, and you can vote. However, there's going to be a lot of restrictions to their voting through things like grandfather clauses, literacy tests, and poll taxes. They are going to be faced with black codes, which are laws designed to keep blacks in conditions as close to slavery as possible. The KKK is going to form to terrorize African Americans. The Freedmen's Bureau, while it was a good intention to help African Americans with education and land rights and learning how to navigate the world as a freedman, great intention, but it lasted only a few years. Segregation is going to continue in the form of Jim Crow laws. We're going to see even the Supreme Court rule that separate is equal in a very important Supreme Court case known as Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. And we're also going to see some black leaders like Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey begin to put the idea of civil rights into the forefront of American society. So, in short, African Americans in the late 1800s are being faced with many problems. Restrictions to their voting, restrictions by the KKK in all ways possible, just terrorizing them, intimidating them, manipulating them. Jim Crow laws, which were political, economic, and social ways to segregate blacks and whites, and last but not least, stuck in a mire of poverty through things like sharecropping and tenant farming. So my suggestion is that you look at the text 500 to 531, work on those definitions. You can certainly use the review book, and you can certainly talk about it in class, come up with any questions that you may have. But that is the way that I would approach the definitions and the other worksheets in your packet. I hope this is helpful to you. Remember, you are the horizon to my sky, and I will see you in class. Thanks a lot. Have a great day or night, depending on where you are.